This video is about Act 3, Scene 4 in Macbeth, looking at it in focus, essentially as if it was one of the selected extracts in the AQA literature question. This is, of course, the Banquo's ghost scene. It's a very, very important scene. I would pretty much suggest it is the pivotal scene in the play, probably best describes the climax of the play. Even though the murder of Banquo is what starts Macbeth's, the process of Macbeth's downfall, it's actually the murder of Banquo that begins the nastiness of the rest of his life, the falling down and everything beginning to go wrong. And it's the appearance of Banquo's ghost that actually destroys everything that he has worked to build. At the beginning of this scene, I would argue that whether he should have killed Banquo or not, whether he needed to kill Banquo or not, he is in a state where he has nothing in the way of him being king and ruling happily. He has a dining room full of people who want him to come and sit with them and look up to him. He has everything that he's worked towards. But the appearance of the ghost in this scene destroys all of that, as he essentially reveals at least a suspicion of what he has done to everybody else. And that, to me, is the focus, the important focus of this scene. So let's get clear what happens in order. It starts with him welcoming his nobleman. Do be clear that he asserts the order of importance, very different from Duncan. He tells everybody to sit in the correct order of importance they have. We get this interlude where one of the murderers appears with the news of Banquo's murder. Important to note that Macbeth has no sadness or regret in his reaction. It's not like after the murder of Duncan. There is absolutely no trauma whatsoever. But then at the banquet, we see Banquo's ghost appear, only to Macbeth, and that leads to him accusing other people in the room of doing it. Of course, doing what from their point of view, but it starts the issues. Lady Macbeth makes excuses for him and the ghost leaves. Lady Macbeth tells him it's his imagination. The ghost comes again, and this time he shouts threats at it, giving away basically a lot, and the ghost leaves again. Macbeth makes excuses, the guests leave, and of course at that point, and it will be followed up by the following scene. That's assuming we ignore the added in Hecate scenes. What we get is that Lennox scene in which it's made clear Lennox is one of the ghosts here, that people do now suspect him and don't necessarily take the official version of events. Then we have this bit at the end where Macbeth worries aloud to Lady Macbeth about revenge, using the word blood an awful lot, and this leads to him deciding to go and see the witches. So, a lot happens in the scene, central to it. Right, let's look at 3 key moments in it and think, what will we draw out of it? Certainly if these were extracts that we were looking at, but also things that we could draw out and use in a broader question. Whichever of the extracts we use, think about these as potentially the big issues in the play that you could do. Be aware that this is probably most likely to be something that either deals with Macbeth as a character. It could potentially have things to do with the relationship between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, but it's most likely to be dealing with the impact of the supernatural. And we see less of that in this first key moment. This is far more to do with Macbeth, his rule, his reaction, his personality, and his reaction. This is his encounter with the first murderer. We start by looking here at a number of his statements here that show his lack of concern for Banquo. When told that the throat of Banquo has been cut, his response is, "You're the best of the cutthroats." No kind of horror, repulsion at the blood, no kind of regret at what he's done, nothing at all that really makes him seem regretful in any way at all. He repeats later that is Banquo safe? Again, if we're looking at this closely, that's the kind of thing we'd notice. But Banquo's safe after the worry about Fleance. That's his concern. Okay, no regret. He is actually dead, isn't he? And when told an even more gruesome detail about the gashes in his head, his simple response is, thanks for that. I think we need to contrast this very clearly with his reaction to Duncan. I don't think it shows necessarily a difference in his views of Banquo and of Duncan. It does show maybe a difference in where he is. I mean, he did commit the murder of Duncan himself. It was the first time he committed murder. But I think it does show that at this stage, there is nothing about the murder of Banquo that really is disturbing him. I think that is important when we look at the ghost in a minute. Now, it's also worth looking, though, at the same time as his reaction to hearing that Fleance is escaped. He expands on this. Then comes my fit again. The badness has come. I would have been perfect otherwise. And he expands on the idea of how he would have been when it means perfect. He would have been whole as marble, founded as rock, broad and general as the casing air. Well, marble and rock, the idea that he would be a part of them gives us a sense of strength, I think, a sense of strength and sturdiness, and maybe suggesting that that is something he feels he's lost. But when he's talking about being broad and general as the casing air, I think there's an interesting image for us to look at. The air around him, it would be something that he sees himself as maybe almost able to carry on naturally, able to be a big part of where he is. It's worth thinking about that one. But I think more importantly is this list that he now gives of his feelings because Fleance has escaped. His contrast with whole as the marble, found as the rock. He's cabined, cribbed, confined and bound in to doubts and fears. Cabined, cribbed, confined, bound in. This image of his fears as imprisoning him. Despite the fact that he is king, he has killed off Banquo, he has killed off his threat. Look, Fleance is not a threat to him at this point. Fleance is a child. He's not going to be an issue. It's only down the line, it's only his legacy that he can think about at all with this. But still, he sees it as something that is imprisoning him. He sees the idea that he is not free. He does not comfortably feel away there. And also, cabined, cribbed and confined use this hard C at the beginning, as though he's almost spitting out the words. Down the bottom as well of this speech, coming to this idea of Banquo's dead but Fleance is not, he takes the interesting image of the serpent, which we saw before as something Lady Macbeth applied to him. It looked like the innocent flower, but be the serpent underneath it. And the word serpent, I always think, does give us a kind of biblical edge to it, rather than using the word snake, which Macbeth also does during the play. We've scorched a snake, not killed it. He has in scene 2 of this act. But what he's doing here is transferring this idea of the serpent, and if we take that biblical edge, the idea of evil, and applying it to Banquo. So he's actually literally looking at Banquo as the evil. Now, I don't necessarily think Banquo himself is evil, but that is the evil that stands in the way of Macbeth. The serpent in his Garden of Eden is dead. The worm, that's all Fleance is, a baby snake, okay? It will breed venom, but it has no teeth for the present. But it keeps an extended metaphor going of the idea of a snake, a baby snake, not the threat, but the sense that the snake is the best image for what the danger is to him, I think is interesting. So, think to yourself about these overall ideas as we go through. The difference between Macbeth's reaction to the murder of Banquo and Duncan, and this balance of vulnerability and strength, okay, that he shows all the way through. Now let's move to a second key moment. Let's move to actually the re-entry of Banquo's ghost. Looking at all the Banquo's ghost exchanges, this to me seems the most likely one to come up because it deals with Banquo's ghost in terms of actually him saying something of importance and interest to it. The first time it appears, he's generally accusing the people around him of doing this. And we get lines like, thou canst not say I did it, kind of quite pathetic ways of making excuses. You can't say I did it, I employed other people to do it. Here has a great deal more to it. Look at this first speech when it re-enters. It's desperate, first of all. He talks about the fears and doubts that were confining him with the idea that Flounce is alive. Here's real fear coming in. Get out, quit my sight. But at the same time as that sense of fear, there is a real sense of strength and aggression. I think this is something that you can make a great deal of if you're looking at this passage. That the fear of what he's seeing is put up against this kind of very masculine aggression. He's ordering it to get out. Get back in the earth. Let the earth hide thee. Accusing it. You don't have any marrow in your bone. Your blood is cold. There's nothing in your eyes. You're not alive. Fear, but also anger and aggression. Now, don't ignore Lady Macbeth's position, especially if you're dealing with the supernatural here. Lady Macbeth, not in this section, but in the bit just before, said to Macbeth, this is the air-drawn dagger that you saw, right? Which reminds us that clearly Lady Macbeth has been told by Macbeth about that moment of the dagger leading him towards the murder earlier on. But it shows her view of things. She may well have called in dark spirits, but the idea of the dagger, the idea of a hallucination here, it is nothing to her. Just a problem. She doesn't believe in this at all. She is still taking charge. She is still solving the problems like she was after the murder of Duncan. But Macbeth undercuts and destroys everything she does. And we notice how this "what man dare I dare" reminds us of her earlier on when she was taunting him about living a coward in his own esteem. And he picks up on that word dare at that point as well. Dare seems to be the important word to him in terms of his masculinity. He dares do whatever a man does, undercutting straight away her attempt to push it down. Leads into this very interesting part that I would take as the centre of this extract if I was given it, where essentially what he seems to be doing is taking that idea of his fear alongside his aggression and his manliness and actually literally challenging the ghost, saying that the issue is, as he says there, the shape it's taken on, what it looks like. Now that might go back to that bones are marrowless, blood are cold, no speculation as eyes, as suggesting it's not just you're not alive, but that is the horror of this situation. And what he says is, I will fight, I wouldn't care if you were a bear, a rhinoceros, a tiger, the Russian Hurricane armed, whatever. I think is just stuff to make it even more extreme. The worst predators you can have, the most violent, dangerous animals you can have. Come at me like that and I won't even tremble. So this is not in terms of a lack in my manliness and my ability to stand up against things. It is the shape that you've come in. And then this interesting one at the end where he says either that or come back to life and I will fight you in the desert. Note he uses the word dare again. Dare me to the desert with a sword. I'll fight you again. And it comes back to that word about trembling. So I assume we're meant to think he is trembling now. And this is his excuse for it, his idea. Look, it is just the way you are then. You can call me a baby of a girl if I'll tremble when I'm fighting you in the desert with a sword. It's the shape you're in now. And that idea comes back when the ghost vanishes and his first reaction is to say, Now the ghost is gone. I am a man again. So this does come into the sense of gender, a sense of masculinity as well. Thinking about in terms of this key moment overall, it is, I think, Macbeth's character in the face of the supernatural. I think do pay attention to that strange combination of fear and aggression and violence that we get. Think about that idea of taking on the one shape that would bother him. Think about the situation he's in. Think about the challenging he feels towards being a man. And think what supernatural forces, not just the effect they're having, I think, but the effect they're intending to have. Now, the final key moment I've chosen is from that bit at the end. This is the last time that we see Macbeth and Lady Macbeth together in the play. It's the last exchange they have with each other. And therefore, it kind of sums up where the relationship is at this point. People have a real tendency to say that the relationship is going distant, it's falling apart, whatever. I think it's important to note that it doesn't. That Macbeth's feelings for Lady Macbeth, and vice versa, stay all the way through. The difference is in the dynamic between them. By that I mean the way that they interact with each other. When we first saw the two of them together, Lady Macbeth's speech dominated. But look at this extract on the page and you can see completely the opposite. It's all about Macbeth. We saw in Act 3, Scene 2 that Macbeth was kind of ignoring Lady Macbeth. Not deliberately, not rudely, but when she spoke to him, he kind of never answered what she said as though he wasn't really listening. Now, in this response, disturbed, and that comes in with this idea that he's focusing on revenge. That seems to be how he's interpreting the sense of Banquo's ghost coming back to him. That his spilling of blood is going to lead to the spilling of blood. Something that he suggested was one of the reasons for not killing Duncan in the first place, in his soliloquy in Act 1, Scene 7. It's a great line, great image, but again really focuses us on the idea of the interchangeability between blood and guilt. The blood disturbing him here in that. But then we see Lady Macbeth's response to him. Notice she's still referring to him as Sir. We still see that kind of interaction between them, but also the politeness. She has just been making excuses, telling him off, but she's aware of her own position within this. Yet it does emphasise what I was saying about the change in dynamic. Can't imagine her calling him Sir back in Act 1, personally. As this carries on, we get an interesting insight into Macbeth as king. Now, Macbeth is an awful king, let's be clear about this. His decision-making particularly is dreadful. And he's just absolutely pulled himself into a vat that he cannot get out of. But this line reveals one of the aspects about how he rules. We can certainly criticise at the beginning that Duncan was too trusting. He reveals that he put an absolute trust in the old Thane of Cawdor, who then, of course, betrayed him. He puts a huge amount of trust in Macbeth, who then betrays him. We might even throw in that MacDonald at the beginning is a Scottish rebel fighting with the opposition. But Macbeth is the opposite. This little line just reminds you of the extent of his paranoia, the lack of his trust. He keeps a servant in every house. He pays a servant to inform him in every noble house in the country. That's a ridiculous extent. It's almost to us Stalin-like in terms of the level of paranoia. And that paranoia leads to him choosing to go to see. And the reason he gives is because he says, at this point, I want to know by the worst means the worst. I need to know the worst. If this has just happened, I need to know how bad it is. It's interesting he refers to going to see them as the worst means as well. That could give you an interesting edge. But of course, it does mean he's going to go to them. That sets us up for the next scene, which contrasts with how they came to him in the past. Now, That then brings us into this beautiful, beautiful image here. I think this is one of my favourite images in Shakespeare, in which he imagines what appears to be almost like a lake of blood that he has stepped into and waded deeper and deeper into. It gives us this sense that he's gone so far that it would be just as easy to keep going in the lake as it would be to come back. A sense that you might just as well keep wading through blood and come out the other side, try and come out the other side, as to return. A sense that despite him seeing everything that's gone wrong, he might as well carry on. His right thing is to carry on. But that idea of wading into a lake of blood, I mean, look at the conflict that suggests. It's not a pleasant image. And it kind of shows how he feels he is at this point. He's in the middle of a lake of blood. And that leads to him deciding, making one of his dreadful decisions, that he's going to start doing things before he thinks about them, acting on things before they can be scanned, which leads into this behaviour we see in Act 5. Now, I mean, it does lead to him coming back to being the brave soldier again, but it's not great advice for a king. So having seen all of this, the breaking apart of Macbeth, shall we say, at this point, it does finish still with the idea that just as he might as well keep wading into the lake of blood, that he says is yet young indeed. There is a lot to come. He hasn't even reached his middle age in his actions that he's got to take. There's lots more to come. He's well aware of it. I think if nothing else, it's not a picture of a man who is happy, comfortable, and certainly not fulfilling his ambitions in the way that he did earlier in the play. So consider his power. Are there ideas in here that he is less powerful than he was before? And also think about that dynamic, and particularly Lady Macbeth's role in it. Her last appearance in the play when she's sane, if you think of it that way, and the last appearance when they're talking to each other. So in this scene, what do we think about overall? I think you need to think about Macbeth at this point, particularly at a point where, as I said earlier, he is king. He is in as much control as he ever could be at the beginning of this scene. And by the end of this scene, it's basically all fallen apart. What do we see about him? And that links into, jumping over here, the last question here about the supernatural. How much influence the supernatural force is having. Do we see this as hallucinations from Macbeth's guilt? Or do we see this as the interference of supernatural forces, creating chaos in the same way that they got him to create chaos by destroying the previous king? So, in other words, to what extent is Macbeth just being destroyed for what he's had? Now, there's also the relationship between them. And I suggested things about the dynamic particularly, but I focused that in here to think about this idea of the effect, or really the lack of effect, that Lady Macbeth actually has on Macbeth at this point. Now, if we take that into the across the rest of the play, then we can take Macbeth's character and consider how is this different from what we've known before. Now, I wouldn't suggest that you go, oh yeah, he's completely changed. I think, as we saw looking through that, there's elements that haven't changed at all. And it could well be an argument that one of the differences really is that he's just being confronted with the result of the choices that he has made. With the relationship between them at Macbeth, compare that dynamic particularly with Act 1 and with Act 2. Think about how it's developing as Macbeth's role is changing. And with that, whatever conclusion you come to with the supernatural, relate it to the other, what Lady Macbeth does, relate it to the other moments where supernatural interference appears to come in the play. And ask that vital question, what level of control do they have? How does that fit into this? You certainly could argue that they kind of take a back seat after this moment because they can. That they follow this up with the witch's further predictions, their equivocal predictions that drive Macbeth into thinking he's invincible and into making his even worse decisions, and then they sit back and let it happen. But it's key to the centre of the play. How much influence, how much control do they actually have?